It's the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Introducing Locked On Sports Today, the first ever 24/7 live sports channel on YouTube. Go beyond the headlines with the local insiders and league experts of the Locked On Podcast Network, covering today's biggest stories. From the court to the field to the rink and to the diamond, our winning roster of hosts deliver all the big game coverage, in-depth analysis, and expert insights that sports fans crave. It's non-stop sports for the non-stop fan. Watch Locked On Sports Today live on YouTube. Local experts, biggest stories every day.
It's getting wild in Minnesota right now, but in the worst way possible. Where do they go from here? Let's dive into that and more on today's episode of the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast.
You're Locked On Fantasy Hockey, your daily podcast on fantasy hockey. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast, making it your first listen every single day. I am your host, Steele Roden, fantasy hockey expert, amateur sports gambler, been co-host of this podcast for almost 2 years exactly at the beginning of February. But before we get into all of today's topics, Minnesota Wild, Toronto Maple Leafs, and big time bets, today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Filip and I use that for all of our last-minute ticket events that we need to get tickets to. So make sure you use the Game Time app because it is absolutely incredible. And if you're watching on YouTube and if you noticed the intro of this episode, Filip's not here. Filip is taking a personal day, resting that beautiful voice of his. So I'll be flying solo for the entirety of today's episode. Figured why not talk about my two favorite teams in the NHL, the Minnesota Wild and the Toronto Maple Leafs, because there's some crazy injuries and conversational news coming out of both these organizations. And like I said, like every single episode, we'll wrap up today with big time bets. Only 2 games on the schedule for Wednesday. And I've got a same game parlay from one of the teams I'm going to be talking about. But like I said, bad news continues to come out of the Minnesota Wild organization. The injuries continue to come crashing down upon their entire roster, it seems like. According to Michael Russo of The Athletic, Filip, Gustavsson, their starting goaltender, out at least a couple of weeks. He's got a 10-9-2 record. He hasn't been putting up the great statistics from last season like we saw, a .903 save percentage on the season. But in his last 4 games, he's been absolutely horrific. .890 save percentage or worse in those last 4 starts for Gustavsson. So this injury could, obviously you don't want to see someone get injured, but it could be coming at a very key time for Gustavsson to just relax, get some rest, rehab this injury, get 100% healthy physically and mentally so the Minnesota Wild can have him fresh for the 2024 half of the season. And the star on the Minnesota Wild, Kirill Kaprizov, out at least 1 to 2 weeks with an injury as well. Took a couple of cross checks right to the rib from Brendan Dillon of the Winnipeg Jets. So 2 absolute vital parts of this Minnesota organization are out for at least the next couple of weeks. And they've already, and this is added on to the already injured reserve players they've got right now. Kirill Kaprizov, he was on a 6-game point streak. He was just starting to heat up. 5 goals, 5 assists in those 6 games. He's now a point per game player on the season, 34 points in 34 games. So this sucks for Kirill Kaprizov and any fantasy GMs that have him out there because he was just starting to get hot. Like I said, in those last 6 games, putting up 5 goals, 5 assists for 10-point total. So this couldn't come at a worse time for the Minnesota Wild, especially at the start of the season. So I've got 3 reasons why this is brutal news for all fantasy GMs out there, as well as the Minnesota organization. Number 1, again, not the way you want to start off the new year for this organization, because with all things considered right now, where you are in the standings, what it's looking like, you're losing your best 2 players, and especially for fantasy GMs out there. Obviously, if you have Gustavsson, it hasn't been the season you've been looking for, but you would expect him to, regroup into the new year. Same goes for Kirill Kaprizov, who, like I said, is on a hot streak right now, but goes down to injury after some brutal cross checks from Dylan on the blue line of the Winnipeg Jets. So just a brutal way to start off the 2024 season because everyone's excited. It's New Year's Eve. You're with your team. You're celebrating out there, but you're dealing with 2 serious injuries to your star players. So not much to be excited about to start off the new year for the Minnesota Wild. Number 2, like I said, they've got already so many players on the IR on this Wild organization. Max Zuccarello's been on the IR for a while. Jonas Brodin's been on the IR for a while. 3 other players that are in their bottom 6 or bottom defensive pair are also on the IR right now. So they continue to get littered with these injuries right now, which is brutal for the Minnesota Wild organization as they sit in the Western Conference. Let me pull up the NHL standings right now. I probably should have had this up before I hopped on and recorded this episode, but this is key for where the Minnesota Wild lay in the standings right now in the Western Conference as they fight for a wild card position. Like we know, a few teams started very, very bad, but Minnesota Wild, even though they've lost their last 2 games, they were 7-3 in their last 10. They're only 4 points back of that second wild card spot, like I said. But the divisions have been getting tighter and tighter as of recently. Seattle's coming up. They found their game. Edmonton, Seattle, we talked about it with Joey Daccord. He puts a 3-0 shutout in that Winter Classic against the Vegas Golden Knights. The Seattle Kraken on a 5-game winning streak. Edmonton Oilers been coming up. They're on a 5-game winning streak, 7-1-2 in their last 10. And Nashville and Arizona, who have been, it seems like, holding on to that wild card, both those wild card spots for at least close to a month now. They've been holding on and they've been playing some solid hockey. So this couldn't come at a worse time for the Minnesota Wild. Again, like I said, only 4 points back of a wild card spot. But with these injuries to key players, they're missing too many key pieces in their lineup. It's going to put a lot of pressure on the young guys like Marco Rossi and Matt Boldy, who are going to have to fill in those positions, get some new line mates. I know Nick Patan is in the top 6, who hasn't played for the Minnesota Wild yet this season. He'll make the top 6, filling in some holes for them with, like I said, a lot of these injury pieces that they've got going on. Like I said, but with Marco Rossi and Matt Boldy, who have been very solid so far. Marco Rossi's been very solid. Matt Boldy's started off the season pretty soft, come on a little bit over the last stretch of games. So these young guys have been picking it up, but now you got to see it on a regular basis without their regular line mates in the lineup. So this is going to be a tough stretch for the Minnesota Wild. Already a team that struggles to score goals, 21st best in the league. It doesn't look like it'll be a very friendly start to 2024 for the Minnesota Wild. Their schedule looks pretty hectic moving forward. And like I said, with these injuries to Kirill Kaprizov and Filip Gustavsson, it's going to be an absolutely huge January for this organization to keep up with the 5 teams that I just mentioned. But I will say this: Marc-Andre Fleury is out there right now in Yahoo and ESPN leagues. He's got a 6-2 record so far this season. He's had a solid start his last 5 starts. He's 63% rostered, up 12% from last week on Yahoo. He's rostered at 16% on ESPN, up 3% on that fantasy format right there. So gotta give a look to Marc-Andre Fleury. Only twice in January do the Minnesota Wild play back-to-back games. So expect Fleury to at least play 10 out of the 14 starts. If he doesn't get at least 10, I'd be very surprised. I expect him to get the run out, and he's been very solid his last 5 starts. So with all of this said, Marc-Andre Fleury is out there in most leagues right now, especially on ESPN. Like I said, only rostered at 16%. So this is going to be a tough stretch for the Minnesota Wild organization. Bill Guerin's going to have to keep a lookout. Maybe they, try to add some pieces in the meantime. I know they're only out for a couple of weeks, but this is a crucial part and a crucial time for the Minnesota Wild as they sit 6th in the wild card standings right now, behind the St. Louis Blues, Edmonton Oilers, Seattle Kraken, Arizona Coyotes, and the Nashville Predators. Is going to be an absolutely, crucial January for this organization. But for all fantasy GMs out there, especially anyone who has Filip Gustavsson, go out and get Marc-Andre Fleury, who will be getting the run out for the time being. We got so much more to talk about. Toronto Maple Leafs have waived Ilya Samsonov as he continues to go down the drain. His game has been absolutely brutal. We'll get to that and big time bets at the end of the episode. But this episode is also brought to you by FanDuel. As the weather gets colder, the NFL offers stay hot on FanDuel Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets, guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That's $150 in bonus bets, win or lose. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, which I urge you to do right now, download the FanDuel app. There's no better time to get into the action. The app is super safe and easy to use. There's a wide range of betting options, including spreads, player props, over-unders, and of course, the fan favorite on this podcast, the same game parlay, which I've got a same game parlay for Wednesday's games. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and kick off the NFL season. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL.
Hey everyone, Chris from Locked On Avalanche here. If you like using debit over credit, I just learned about something that's definitely a game changer. Discover Cashback Debit. It's a checking account that rewards everyone with cash back on everyday purchases, which means you can get cash back on NHL tickets or head-to-toe hockey gear to make this season a total win. Check out eligibility and terms at discover.com/cashbackdebit. Discover Bank, member FDIC.
And thank you so much for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast your first listen every single day. Go check out Locked On Sports Today, the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with local experts of Locked On, plus the national shows covering every single league. So go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. And thank you so much for tuning in for today's episode with your boy Steele Roden. Make sure you hit the subscribe, leave a follow, and a 5-star review. We appreciate all that love and support you show us Monday through Friday, 7 o'clock in the morning. I'm going to try to show some love to the Toronto Maple Leafs and to Ilya Samsonov. It's going to be hard to do because of how they've been playing recently. Like I said, Toronto Maple Leafs have waived Ilya Samsonov, who has now been sent down to the Toronto Marlies. In the meantime, they call up rookie goaltender Dennis Hidelby, 7-5-3 record, 220 goals against average, and a .919 save percentage with 2 shutouts. I'll talk about him a little bit more later in this episode, but I want to talk about the Maple Leafs. I want to talk about Ilya Samsonov to begin with. The Maple Leafs do have a little bit of breathing room right now in the Atlantic Division. They are in that third spot in their division right now, right behind the Boston Bruins and Florida Panthers, who have really, over the last stretch of games, because the Leafs are on a losing streak right now, have kind of separated themselves from the Leafs. But again, they're only 5 points and then 9 points back with a couple games in hand. But I said breathing room in the Atlantic because of the Atlantic teams under them right now. Currently tied at 41 points with the Tampa Bay Lightning. They're 3 points ahead of the Detroit Red Wings. But with that being said, they have 3 games in hand on the Detroit Red Wings and 4 games on hand on the Tampa Bay Lightning. So that's why they have a little bit of breathing room. And that's also why at this point in the season, to start off 2024 and what we've seen so far from Samsonov this season, as well as the last 3 to 4 games, you had to do this. This was the move that Tree Living had to make for the Maple Leafs organization, and it was a smart move to do so because you cannot go into January with how Samsonov is playing right now and have him as your starting goaltender or even on the roster after his last performance. He's got a record of 5-2-6 on the season, an .862 save percentage, which is the worst in the NHL among active starting goaltenders right now. He's lost his last 4 games, allowing 4 or more goals in each of those games. And of course, the butter on top of the bread right now, 2 of those games were 6-5 overtime losses against the Columbus Blue Jackets, especially in that last performance where the Leafs were up 4-2, and they came back and lost in overtime to the Columbus Blue Jackets. So absolutely brutal performances from Ilya Samsonov. And that's probably, like Filip said so many times, probably, as many people have said, probably the best decision that Tree Living has not made this season so far was giving Samsonov an extension because the poor play, the confidence right now, you can see it on his body. The body language just overall has been absolutely just sad to see for Samsonov, because from last year and what we saw him do, great hope for what he could bring to this team. And just like Jack Campbell for the Edmonton Oilers this season, where's this guy? doesn't look like the same player from last season, same goaltender from last season. So this had to be done for Ilya Samsonov. Hopefully he goes down. He can get some good reps in there with the Toronto Marlies, get his confidence back up, get back to, a stable place mentally with his game. And hopefully he can get brought back up and take over alongside Joseph Woll when he comes back. But this is going to be a brutal month for the Toronto Maple Leafs. I believe it's one of the tougher schedules over the next 30 days. Starts off with a California road trip, which isn't as scary anymore as it used to be, but it can be when you have the Toronto Maple Leafs goalie depth. You have Ilya Samsonov, Joseph Woll. Woll gets injured. Samsonov, poor play. He gets sent down. Now you bring up Martin Jones over the last 5 games, and now you have, like I said, Dennis Hidelby, who has been pretty solid for the Marlies, but this is going to be a tough month and a tough stretch for the Toronto Maple Leafs with these 2 goaltenders, because you know how it is with Toronto Maple Leaf goaltenders. They always find a way to let you down. But like I said, they start off January with a California road trip. They play the San Jose Sharks twice, 1 away, 1 at home. They're back. They take on the New York Islanders, the Colorado Avalanche, Detroit Red Wings before starting a 4-game road trip against the Edmonton Oilers, Calgary Flames, Vancouver Canucks, Seattle Kraken, and finished off the month with 2 games against the Winnipeg Jets. So this is going to be an interesting month for the Toronto Maple Leafs. They continue to do great things offensively with Austin Matthews, John Tavares, so many guys, some depth guys now really panning out, like Max Domi and Nick Robertson getting into the play. But like I said, these 2 goaltenders, Martin Jones, Dennis Hidelby, keep an eye on them in your fantasy league. It might be time, like I said, on the waiver wire targets from a couple weeks ago. Martin Jones rostered at 43% on Yahoo, 9% on ESPN. Give Jones a look. He's 4-3-0 on the season, a .915 save percentage. A couple of those times he came in halfway through the game. So you can't rely on those save percentage because of, especially that 9-3 embarrassment against the Buffalo Sabres where he came in halfway through the game, allowed 4 goals. So Martin Jones, definitely give him a look. But even if Dennis Hidelby gets a start or 2, maybe take a chance on him if he plays one of those lower tier teams. Like I said, 7-5-3 record on the year with the Toronto Marlies, 220 goals against average, .919 save percentage, 2 shutouts. Guy's an absolute unit, standing at 6'7" tall and 223 pounds. I believe he's going to be the tallest goaltender in the NHL at this point on a roster. So guy's an absolute unit, huge, and he looks great out there for the Toronto Marlies, soon to be Toronto Maple Leafs. But definitely give these 2 goaltenders a look as the goalie struggles continue for the Minnesota Wild as well as the Toronto Maple Leafs. Hopefully, like I said, tough stretches for both these clubs. But if they can somehow pull this through, Toronto Maple Leafs can hold on to that 3rd position in the Atlantic, maybe even creep up a little closer to the Florida Panthers. If the Minnesota Wild can just find a way to win some games, get at least 1 point in some of those tougher matchups where they can just hang on and close the gap on a few of these teams in the Western Conference, and then Gustavsson and Kaprizov come back, that would make me feel a lot better. But it's a tough stretch of games, tough stretch in this next month to start off 2024 for both these teams, my 2 favorite teams. So I'm going to be watching them very, very closely, but we're also going to be watching those big time bets where the money is made. Let's get over to where the money is made. But first, this episode is also brought to you by Game Time. You shouldn't have to worry about buying your tickets to your next big event. That's why we use the Game Time app. Game Time is the fastest and easiest way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater events near you, with killer last-minute deals on all-in prices, views from your seats, and the best price guaranteed. Last-minute tickets, flash deals, zone deals, easy to find and buy tickets for every kind of event in your area. And you can also see the seats in the venue before you make the purchase. Game Time is the only ticketing app that gives you complete peace of mind with your purchase. They're obsessed with finding ways to help you save money on tickets every single event. Game Time has deals on tickets right up to the start of the event, and even an hour after it starts. It's the place to find last-minute seats. And the Game Time guarantee means you'll always get the best price if you find tickets in the same section and row for less. Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. And thank you so much for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast your first listen every single day. Continue to hit the subscribe, leave a follow button, and a 5-star review. I appreciate all that love and support you show us every single day. Thank you so much. Hopefully everyone's starting off the 2024 season with a bang, making some money out there, recouping some of that holiday season money spending over the Christmas and New Year's Eve break. 2 games on the schedule for big time bets for Wednesday's betting board. New Jersey Devils taking on the Washington Capitals, but the Toronto Maple Leafs on that California road trip, they're taking on the Anaheim Ducks. And that's where I'm starting and ending with the same game parlay in this matchup. Number 1, Anaheim Ducks, Toronto Maple Leafs over 6.5 goals in this matchup at -128. 7 of the last 10 have gone over the number between these two teams in their contest. Matthews, Marner, Nylander continuing to get it done every single game now. Trevor Zegras is back with the Ducks. Mason McTavish, Cam Ballard, Jamie Drysdale, Troy Terry. They're all going right now for the Ducks, even though they've kind of skidded off the last 2 months when they had a hot start, 3-7-0 in their last 10 games. Nevertheless, Ducks Leafs over 6.5 at -128 is the first pick. Second pick, that's why it's the same game parlay. Maple Leafs on the money line, -205. Not the greatest odds out there. You could take the puck line -1.5 at +105 or a +150. Juice up your odds there for the same game parlay, which the times that the Maple Leafs have won in these contests, I believe 5 out of the 8 have been by 2 or more goals, but I'm going to play a little bit safer for the same game parlay. Take the Maple Leafs money line -205. They've won 8 out of the last 10 matchups between these two teams. And then the last pick of the night, Austin Matthews, anytime goal. He's been scoring. I believe he's on a goal streak right now, but he's scoring right now, and he's scoring from everywhere. It doesn't matter where he has the puck. The goal line, the blue line, top of the circle, in the slot, right along the boards. He's scoring if he's shooting the puck. So Matthews, anytime goal in 11 games against the Ducks. He has 7 goals, 7 assists for 14 points. So I like the anytime goal in this matchup. It's going to be a free-flowing game with a lot of young studs on both teams. But I'm taking the Leafs on this one in a second game of a back-to-back when they played the LA Kings yesterday. So take the same game parlay, only 2 games on the schedule. Those are 3 picks. Lock of the night, Ducks, Leafs, over 6.5 at -128. Thank you so much for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast your first listen every single day. And again, check out Locked On Sports Today. They've launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. They're here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with local experts, plus local experts of Locked On, plus the national shows covering every single league. So go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. And thank you again so much for tuning in for today's episode with your boy Steele Roden. Have a great day. Good luck with all your bets out there. And we shall see you back here again tomorrow. Peace.
The St. Louis Cardinals are coming off one of their toughest years in recent memory and have rebuilt their rotation in hopes of getting back to the top in 2024 and will be there every pitch of the way. Hey, it's JD from Locked On Cardinals, inviting you to join me all season long as the Cardinals try to reclaim their rightful spot among baseball's elite franchises. The team has compiled a collection of new arms that includes AL Cy Young runner-up Sonny Gray to lead the pitching staff next season. Be there for the ascension of top prospects Jordan Walker, Mason Wynn, and Nolan Gorman as they mash their way alongside future Hall of Famers Paul Goldschmidt and Nolan Arenado. How will manager Ali Marmol fare in the final year of his contract? What kind of impact will the return of Yadier Molina to the team have? Get analysis and opinions on every move, every dinger, every strikeout, every win, and every loss, and what is shaping up to be one of the most important seasons in the storied history of Cardinals baseball. It's the Locked On Cardinals podcast, available for free wherever you get your podcasts.